Thanks, Guy. That's right. I'm joined by the Latvian President Egils Levits, just coming out of that NATO meeting with the President of the United States and the other leaders of NATO. Thank you so much for joining Bloomberg Television.
Hello. Yeah, thank you.
President Biden is now at this G7 meeting, and there's going to be a draft statement, a warning to President Putin about the use of chemical or biological weapons, which Jens Stoltenberg says will have dire consequences on NATO countries as well. Would you view that as an attack on a NATO ally?
The use of chemical, biological, nuclear weapons is a big threat to Europe, to the whole world, not only to Ukraine, and we should give a adequate response to that. I cannot yet announce this response, but of course it would be a response for Russia. Russia should think twice before Russia will use such weapons.
We keep hearing about, quote, severe consequences.
Yeah.
You won't mention them, but were they discussed? What kind of consequences NATO and the West would impose?
We should not announce these consequences in advance.
But wouldn't that be a deterrent? Wouldn't announcing the consequences potentially deter President Putin from using those type of weapons?
The consequences would be, but we would not announce this in advance, because then, of course, Russia will know and will calculate that.
But you know what the response is?
We will think about, and this calculated ambiguity is a part of our tactic.
Would you consider the use of chemical, biological, nuclear weapons a red line?
Of course, it would change the situation completely, and the answer should be respective.
Is there a potential that this type of escalation from Russia would start to a conversation amongst NATO allies to use military intervention?
Our politics now is to help the Ukraine in every possible way to defend the nation themselves. And we are giving military help, lethal weapons, other military equipment, and of course financial, economic support, humanitarian support. But of course, this is the Ukrainian nation is very highly motivated to defend the country, and we are helping in every possible way to do it.
I want to ask you about what's going on in terms of NATO military presence in the Baltics, in Latvia. I spoke to the press secretary of the Pentagon, John Kirby, and he said he's unsure if this is now a long-term heightened presence. Do you expect that to last?
We have discussed the strengthening of NATO's eastern flank. This is Baltics, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, also Czech Republic, also, and there is agreement that the eastern flank should be strengthened. Is already done, partially. For example, there is already a decision to double the number of NATO battle groups in this area. We have now 4 battle groups, one in Estonia, one in Latvia, one in Lithuania, then in Poland, and now there would be 4 additional more. And also this
And you think they'll be permanent?
Of course they are permanent. NATO battle groups are permanent, but of course the permanent presence of US forces, this is a different issues, and we are in contact. We should see how to deploy the NATO forces so that the whole NATO eastern flank is more secure, more sure as it is now.
I want to ask you about the sanctions. There's still Russian oil and gas flowing into Europe. At some point, is Europe going to have to cut that off?
Yes. In principle, there is a clear decision. We should cut off this.
But this is going to hurt your economy.
Yes, of course. There are certain costs we should pay for our freedom, for our independence, and in shortest possible time we will do it.
I believe last year Latvia took in 90% of their natural gas from Russia, and now President Putin is asking those contracts to be paid in rubles.
Yeah.
Is that something Latvia is willing to do?
It is not only for Latvia, this is also for Germany and other buyers of Russian gas. We will see how we will answer. But in general, Europe, also Latvia too, has decided already to cut the energy dependence from Russia as soon as possible.
But if next week you had to pay in rubles to keep the lights on and the houses warm in Latvia, is Latvia willing to do that?
We have enough reserves for the moment.
And if you start to wean yourself off of Russian gas, where else will you find it?
Yes, it is possible to get alternatives. LNG, there are LNG terminals in Europe, and then it is also possible to replace Russian gas.
Are you talking to those types of partners?
Yes.
The cost, though, is going to be incredibly higher. Is there something the government's willing to do to help ease the pain for consumers?
Yes, of course, I can repeat, this is a price for our freedom. And it is better to pay in dollars or in euros, as the Ukrainians are doing with blood.